All right, let's dive right in. We are talking about a huge shift in Florida's laws, one that's got everybody talking. Open carry. A recent court ruling has completely changed the landscape, and honestly, whether you own a firearm or not, this is something you really need to get your head around. So let's break it all down, what this really means for you, for business owners, and for everyone in the state. And this right here, this quote, it pretty much sums up everything we're about to talk about. A ban that's been in place for a long, long time has been lifted, and that means a new freedom. But as we're going to see, that freedom comes with some very real, very sharp, legally defined boundaries. Okay, so first things first, let's get right to the headline news. What is the single biggest change that just went down? And there it is, a sentence that simple, but wow, it changes everything. For decades, Florida was one of only a few states with a flat-out ban on openly carrying a firearm in public. That time is officially over. But the real question is, how permanent is this? And here's the kicker. The reason this is such a landmark moment. A Florida court didn't just question the ban, it struck it down. And then the Attorney General's office confirmed they're not going to fight it. So this isn't some temporary hold. This is the new reality in Florida. It's here to stay. But to really get why this is such a big deal, you gotta understand the why behind it. What was the court's logic for making such a massive decision? What was going through the judges' minds? It really boiled down to two key things, the Constitution and history. The judges basically argued that the Second Amendment's right to bear arms historically meant just that, carrying them openly for self-defense. They saw Florida's ban as a more modern rule that went against that long-standing American tradition. So think about it like this. The court didn't just tweak the rules, they flipped the whole board over. Openly carrying a firearm is no longer the exception to the rule, it's now considered the default, the baseline right here in the state. Okay, but, and this is a huge but, this new freedom isn't a free-for-all, not even close. There are very specific places, let's just call them the no-go zones, where carrying a firearm is still absolutely 100% illegal. And look, the law is super specific about this. This list you're seeing, which comes straight from Florida Statute 790.06, these aren't suggestions. These are hard and fast rules, written right into the law. No ambiguity at all. And let's be crystal clear here. Walking into one of these places armed isn't a simple mistake. It's not a whoops. It is committing a crime, plain and simple. The law draws a very bright line in the sand, and crossing it has serious consequences. So that's the government side of things. But what about when you walk into a private business, like your local coffee shop or grocery store? Well, that's a whole other and super important set of rules we need to cover. Now this is where a lot of people get tripped up, so pay close attention. You see that no gun sign on a business door? In Florida, that sign by itself doesn't actually have the force of law. However, if the property owner or one of their employees verbally asks you to leave, that request is legally binding. It has the full force of the law behind it. Let's just play this out in the real world. Imagine you walk into a store and you're openly carrying. The manager comes up to you and politely says, "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." If you just say, "Okay," turn around and walk out, you're golden. No problem at all. No laws broken. But if you dig your heels in, argue, and refuse to go, you've just crossed the line from exercising a right to committing a felony called armed trespass. It's that serious. All right, so we've talked about the government's rules, we've talked about private property rights. Now let's turn the lens around and talk about the responsibility that falls squarely on the shoulders of the person actually choosing to carry. When you boil it all down, this new legal landscape demands a higher level of personal accountability. First, discipline, because how you carry is now out in the open, more visible than ever. Second, knowledge, because I didn't know is never going to be a valid excuse. And third, respect. You have to respect that property owners have the final say on their own land. You know, this focus on responsibility isn't really new for Florida. The state has always had a pretty high bar for who it considers responsible enough to carry a firearm. We can see that just by looking at the rules they've had for years for getting a concealed carry license. Just look at some of the things that will get you disqualified from that license. We're talking felony convictions, a documented history of substance abuse, certain mental health adjudications, a domestic violence injunction, the list goes on. The message from the state has always been crystal clear. The right to carry is tied to a proven track record of lawful and responsible behavior. So let's put it all together. The court has affirmed a constitutional right. That part is now settled in Florida law. But the right itself doesn't automatically grant you the skill, the judgment, or the discipline to exercise it safely. That only comes from training and practice. The court can't teach your judgment. That part's on you. And that's really what it all comes down to, isn't it? With this freedom now restored, the focus shifts away from the courts and on to the individual. The law has defined the what and the where, but the how, the wisdom, the safety, and the respect with which this right is used ultimately falls on every single person who chooses to exercise it.